Clarence worked out, which is what we talk about in the book, is he had to do three things fundamentally. He had to create a legendary product, i.e. in this particular case flash freezing, and how you package it, including cellophane, which wasn't a thing back then. He had to create a great company, how do you sell and distribute that? And then he had to create a great category. And in Clarence's case, he was out evangelizing fresh food. He was evangelizing that the enemy was canned food, tasted like yuck, and pretty much the entire United States at that time in the 20s took that belief, started consuming flash frozen foods, and of course we walk up and down the supermarkets today just assuming that was always there. That's one entrepreneur, one legendary entrepreneur who went on to build a great category. And there's actually a science behind categories. It's been a not that well studied subject in the past. We invested quite a lot of money for a small company that we are in category science, and I just want to take you through a few things. We did both what we call quantitative research, which is we looked at all the numbers and databases and things like that around the world about startup companies. We also did qualitative. We did over 100 interviews, and many of them in the book. There's about 135 interviews actually in the book, and which was really trying to understand what they did. This is kind of what happened, and this is what the great leaders actually did. And we have three insights for you today. They're all in the book. The first one is that, for the most part, technology world is a winner-take-all game. It really is. You think about a social network. Who's the winner of the social network category? Okay. Who's number two?
Who cares?
Right. Who cares? There isn't one, right? It's a winner-take-all marketplace. And in fact, I can tell you, having done the research, that the category king, as we call them, the company that owns, defines and dominates the market, actually takes 76% of the market cap of the entire category, right? So social networking is about a $500 billion category. Facebook is worth $400 billion today, right? So this is about taking all the marbles. You're playing for all the marbles. Don't be confused about playing for number 2 or number 3 or number 4. They get less than 10 or 15% of the market cap. And the smart venture capitalists, the smart investors, the smart employees all know that. And that's why those VCs are successful, because they invest in what we call category kings. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that the categories themselves have a natural life cycle. When you first hear about a category, the value of it is 0, right? But over time, it develops and accelerates in the middle, and ultimately during what we call the dominate phase, it starts to plateau off. And there's a famous VC in America who says he's looking for $0 billion markets. That's what he wants to invest in. He wants to invest in these particular markets in the early stages so that when they become big, that's when he's in. At the same time, when they first come out, you see that there's a plethora of other companies going out there and competing for that same marketplace. So there's a number of vendors. In the middle, you've got growth, and you've got what we call expanding margins, because the number of companies goes down, pricing power goes down, value actually gets created in what we call the develop phase. So you want to be the company that does the definition and then rules during this develop phase, and generally that's somewhere in the 5 to 10 year range of a particular category. And then the third thing is that categories themselves aren't static. For those of you who know technology, this is the CRM category, the evolution of the customer relationship management category. In the early days, in fact, before the 1980s, how did we actually store phone numbers? Anyone remember? What is it, Bob? What were they called? Rolodexes, that's right. It was a piece of paper that you wrote, believe it or not, kids, believe it or not, we used to write the number down on a piece of paper, and it was in a Rolodex, and if I wanted to call Bob, I'd look up Bob, I'd find his number, and I'd dial. I'd have a phone bolted to the wall, I'd pull it off, and I'd ring it. That's how it went.
But I also had my little black book.
Yeah, you might have had a black book too, that works. Then what happened, the PC revolution came out, and two companies, Act and Goldmine, said, hey, Bob, stop storing them on the Rolodex, put them in the computer. Then if I want to look up Bob, I'd type in Bob, Bob's number would come up, I'd dial it. And then people say, well, gee, if you're calling Bob and you know his number, why don't you put any notes about the conversation with Bob into the system? That became Salesforce automation. And then what happened is this guy called, did anyone know who created the client-server CRM marketplace? Darryl, you must know. Tom Siebel, good answer, whoever said that. He said, no, it's not just about the front end of the business, it's all of the business, field, service, customer support, and everything else. And he rolled it into a thing called customer relationship management. So that category then evolved again, and then of course, Cloud CRM is owned by probably the greatest category designer of all time, Mark Benioff. And so categories themselves kind of evolve over time. So that's the third thing you kind of need to understand.